We are being live streamed.
Okie dokie. Hey everybody, good afternoon. Sophia Towns here with the Low Country Autism Foundation, and we are here together today for another edition of Laugh Community Conversations Facebook Live edition. Today I'm joined by my colleague Stacy Litton and also our special guest today, Travis Breeding, who is an autistic adult. And today we are going to discuss hiring autistic adults in the workplace and why should employers consider individuals with autism in the workplace. So Travis, I would like to start by a brief introduction, if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Actually, I grew up in Huntington, Indiana, which is just outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana. I've lived there for 36 years, and I just moved to Fishers, Indiana, which is outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. A little bit bigger environment for me, and I got my own apartment for the first time. So I'm really super excited about living on my own, and I'm able to do things like this with freedom to not be interrupted by people that I'm living with, which is kind of nice. And I am 36 years old, like I said. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome back when Asperger's syndrome was a thing in 2007 when I was 22 years old, so late diagnosis. And I've had many jobs, and trying to keep them is always a challenge. So we can talk some about that in a little bit, but right now I'm getting ready to transition. I was doing some stuff for Amazon, but I'm getting ready to transition into doing some consulting actually for autism related businesses and things like that. So pretty excited about that. And yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. I love sports, basketball, football, baseball, things like that. So.
And you're an author too, right?
Yes, I am an author. That's probably the most important part, is that I write books about autism. So I've written probably 10 or 12 books about autism spectrum disorder and mental health. I actually have comorbid schizoaffective disorder, diagnosed with that autism. So kind of a complicated person, so to speak.
That's wonderful. Hey, about the sports teams, who are your favorite sports teams?
The Green Bay Packers. I'm kind of bummed out because they said Aaron Rodgers is going to be out this week. I heard that on the news. So,
I heard that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got COVID, and so I like the Boston Celtics out of Boston, and Indiana Pacers and Indianapolis Colts. Lots of baseball teams, Dodgers, Cubs, Reds, things like that. So I don't know if there's too many professional sports teams in South Carolina, is there?
No, there's not. But close by are those Atlanta Braves who just won the World Series. So
yeah,
we're all pretty excited down here about that.
That's very true.
Yeah,
I am a big Clemson Tigers fan though. So that
oh yeah.
Oh, Travis.
I went to Clemson, so we like to hear that, Travis.
Yeah.
Stacy likes to hear it, Travis. I'm a Carolina fan.
Oh.
Gamecocks.
They've got a good girls basketball team, I think, women's basketball team. So
amazing. Yes. Yeah. The coach is just amazing. She's awesome. All right, well, let's jump in. Okay. I have some questions for you. And guys, those of you out there who are watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to post your questions in our comments section. Our other colleague at Laugh, Kaylee, is watching over those, and she will let me know if we have any questions, and then we'll ask Travis and get those questions answered for you. So don't be shy. All right, Travis, first question. Why should employers hire people with autism?
Right now, the obvious answer, I think, we'll get into a better answer, but the obvious answer right now is I think we're having an employment crisis where we need employees everywhere. So why not hire people with autism? Because we'll be loyal and come to work and do things like that. But actually, people with autism are very loyal and dedicated. Once they learn the craft of their trade, they will show up and do their job and show up, like make it even like a special interest where they're like wanting to be there 24/7. I know when I had my first job at Ponderosa Steakhouse, I worked at a steakhouse and I was the cook, and I just loved to be there because of the social opportunities it gave me to be there. And I love to work. So I would actually be one of those people that other kids would call off, and I would be like calling the restaurant and saying, hey, did anybody call off? Can I come into work today? And everybody thought I was weird because I wanted to work all the time. And so people with autism will be very dedicated. Once, if we give them the right supports and they learn how to do their job, they will probably do it better than other people, just because they're going to be more passionate about it, and things like that. So there's a lot of dedication, a lot of loyalty, and a lot of willingness to learn and engage. So there's a lot of potential there with autism employees.
Wonderful. Great answer. I love it. And I agree with you 100%. Don't you,
Yeah.
Stacy?
Oh yeah, and you mentioned supports, Travis. What kind of supports do you think are needed, and are they different depending on what the job is, or
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
They're very unique and very person-centered. So it's hard to speak of just autism and like what supports you would need for things like that. But I can tell you that social supports are very important. So a lot of people are thinking of adaptive supports, like natural supports for job-related skills, things like that. But I can tell you my biggest struggle on the job has been social. It hasn't been like job skills. But then again, like I'm Asperger's, so I'm more of like higher level social functioning or adaptive skills wise. I'm doing pretty well. I hate to use the term. It's hard to talk about it without using the term, but I hate to use the term high functioning and low functioning because they're very misleading terms. So like there are actually some very all that tells us basically is how verbal a person is. So like, and there are some high verbal learners that are very low functioning in life and some low verbal learners that are very high functioning in life. So it's really very, if you met one person with autism, you've really only met one person with autism. But for me, I always struggle with social supports. So I always end up escaping, to use like an ABA term, the situation to where I want to quit my job because I like a girl, for example, that I'm working with, and I don't know how to like her without stalking her. So I end up quitting to avoid stalking her at work. And so like that's where we need to have job coaches and behavior analysts that are trained on like social supports, to where it's not necessarily like I use the example. I didn't need to learn how to tie the trash bag. I need to learn how to have a crush on someone without being inappropriate. So we need like appropriate social supports in place to help us keep our job and things like that. So very important.
That's very important. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay, second question I have for you. What are some common misconceptions about people with autism that need to be cleared up so that these people with autism can be hired? I think that's a huge problem in the workplace, or just simply employers have misconceptions about autism, and that makes them very hesitant to hire an individual with autism.
Right. I think they're just not sure how to work with people on the spectrum. So we need more awareness, more education programs, things like that. But I think that the biggest misconception is like, well, you can't, you can't, for someone who's nonverbal, it's like, well, you can't talk. How could you possibly work? Things like that. And it's like, well, there's so much more to communication. We know the communication is actually more like 93% nonverbal and 7% verbal. So that puts those, people that are on the lower end of the spectrum are quite capable of doing a job, and we can find them in an appropriate placement. But it's all about job matching and finding the appropriate job. And I think I'm going to agree with someone named Peter Gerhardt, if you've ever heard of him. He's a behavior analyst out of New Jersey, and he says, I think any job is a good job as long as it's a job that pays. So we don't want to just put our guys in, we don't want to put our kids in jobs to where volunteer work is okay, but we don't want them in like, we kind of want to go away from like the sheltered workshop type of thing, and we want to get community engagement, community jobs. We just have to educate employers about what people with autism can do versus what people with autism can't do. So what we can do is more important than what we can't do. And I think that's a very important thing, and something that we need to continue to educate, raise awareness, and job training programs, but also let the individual with autism come in and train their coworkers how to interact with them and things like that. It was very important as well. So
that's a great idea. I love that, having the employee come in, the employee with autism coming in and doing a training. This is how you work with me. This is how you interact with me. I love that. It's wonderful. Stacy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Travis, every time he and I have spoken, he is so insightful in terms of the things that he needs in order to be successful. Do you think that's something that's important for employers to ask the person, you know, what is it that you need in order to be successful? Do you think that, you know, that's going to be able to be articulated?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's going to be easier for us to explain it too when we're asked, as opposed to making us feel like we have to bring it up.
Mhm.
But like we can self-advocate, I can self-advocate, but it's even better if someone asks me, "Hey, what do I need to be successful in the workplace, and what do I need to be in order to keep this job and be successful?" And then like it's difficult because then we need to go back and we need to train not only the people on the job, but let's train vocational rehab on how to support folks with autism and disabilities on getting jobs and things like that. So
Mhm.
that way that they can come in and work with us. Job coaches know what we're needing, and employers know what we're needing. And most importantly, let's preach to have open communication between the employer, coworkers, job coaches, and vocational rehab all together, working together as one.
Absolutely. Yeah, that collaboration is so important. Just to make sure everybody is successful and that everybody's on the same page. That's
Yeah.
such a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Mhm.
My next question is, how does an employer interview an individual with autism? What would an interview look like?
That's a good question because for it's going to depend on the person, honestly. So, like we said, if you've met one person with autism, you've really only met one person with autism. So you might use like, someone might go to a job interview and have an assisted communication device, but you could do like for me, for example, I want the interview to be just like it would be for a typical person, because I'm able to like do well with scripts and I've scripted job interviews. So I know what they're going to ask me, and I have no problem getting a job. Like I've literally had 100 jobs in my lifetime. The problem for me is keeping the job. So like I know how to pass, I know how to ace a job interview, and it would just I want them to be like typical interviews. But for someone who's like nonverbal, like an interview for me is going to look entirely different than an interview with Temple Grandin, and things like that. So just because person centered, things like that. But you want to always ask them about their strengths and let them talk about their strengths, because often or not, more often than not, their strength is going to be their special interest, and they'll be able to talk about it all day long. So we like to talk about our special interest, and that's very important for us. And it's even more important, like if we can find a career like Temple Grandin did with the special interest, to where we can focus on that and make it earn a living doing that. So.
Do you think that it's important when say someone is going for a job interview, do they need to let somebody know that they have autism before the interview? Is that important, or is that something that can come up naturally during the conversation?
It's always a personal preference, but I always let it come up naturally. So they ask me, I put self-employment on my resume because I haven't had a steady work history, right? So I use self-employment because I've been writing books since 2010. So
Mhm.
I've got steady like employment history there. So for me, it always comes up that I have autism naturally because I'll talk about writing books and things like that. So I kind of prompt them a little bit to ask me about autism. And for other people, they're not comfortable disclosing their autism. But most importantly, I mean, I think people are becoming more aware of it. And it's even a great idea. Like you might disclose you have autism. It might actually give the employer an idea to like actually create a position for you within the company
Mhm.
based on your strengths. So I always think it's a good thing to tell people you're on the spectrum, and see what comes out of it when you do that.
Mhm.
So.
What about if you need to use some type of augmentative communication device? Do you think that's important to let an employer know before a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important. Self-advocacy is always really important. You might do it yourself, or you might have, an advocate do it for you.
Mhm.
There's lots of options for doing that. But even like now, you can just send them like an email and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I use this device. Could it be okay if I come to an interview with this device?" And just make them aware of it so they're not like shocked when you come in and things like that.
Mhm.
So I think self-advocacy is a very important tool. That's one skill we need to do better teaching to kids with autism and self-advocacy, so that they can, when they're adults, they can advocate for themselves and raise awareness and, just communicate their strengths so they can get hired and maintain jobs and employment, things like
Absolutely.
that.
Definitely, definitely. Um, So how can an employer make the workplace more autism friendly?
They can always do things like they could have like special trainings for their employees on autism, and let the individual themselves do the trainings, or bring in other people, behavior analysts or teachers or psychologists to do trainings, things like that. But like I like to let the person do the training themselves because they know themselves best and they know their autism best. So it's better to train people on you versus train them on autism generically. But like, and you know, it's actually not a bad idea to let even everyone working there come in maybe like once a month and do a training on themselves. So like they're educating other people about their indifferences and how they work, because it's not just autism. To tell you the truth, every one of us is on the autism spectrum somewhere. So like we could all benefit from like having that opportunity to teach someone about ourselves, and what it's like to work with us and things like that. So educating them, providing resources. I know like Peter Gerhardt tells a story about how he made it a system to where he encouraged the other employees to come up and say hi to individuals with autism at work. And they actually turned it into a competition to see who could get the individual to say hi back the most. And they had like a pool in the office to see who was going to like get John to say hi the most back. So that was really exciting. Get them engaged and make it fun for them and make them want to interact with the autistic people. And I think we'll fit in and get along well on the job.
Those are great ideas. I love that, making it a little competition to see we can get them to say hi the most. That's really
Yes.
clever.
That's great.
Yes, Peter's pretty creative.
Yeah.
love
That's very
that.
clever.
I
So
love
can
that.
you maybe share with us some of the supports that would have helped you, like maybe choose a position that you've had at some point, and let us know. I know, because you said it's difficult to give some blanket examples, but maybe something that you think would have really been beneficial to you in order to help you in a specific job that you've had.
Sure. So I had a job at Wendy's, working at Wendy's, and I actually was doing really well. I got trained on doing the drive-through, right? And so when you do drive-through, you have these headphones on, you're taking orders, but there's also an option to, like, you can press a button and you can talk just inside to each other, to the employees. And the biggest issue I ran into was everyone would want to do like small talk while they were doing that, while they're working, when they're not taking an order. And there'd be jokes going on, and people would be like, well, like innuendos and things like that. People would be like, well, Travis, what do you think? And like, so I could have benefited from having someone like listening in to the conversation, giving me advice on what to say back and how to interact with them. Because that's one of the reasons why I ended up quitting, was because I didn't know how to interact with them and how to joke around with them and get along with them in that way. So it wasn't necessarily a job skill that made me quit. It was a social skill, just not knowing how to engage with my coworkers, that forced me to quit my job. So
Right. And I actually worked the drive-through at Wendy's too when I was younger. I did have that job, so I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. So what do you think about peer supports, in terms of, instead of bringing a job coach in, like from the outside, having another peer at a job who's willing to kind of get a little training and then work with an individual with autism to help them be a little bit more successful?
I think that's a great idea. And I know this will be like, you guys will understand this term, but I think that provides you the biggest chance at NET, natural environment teaching and training. So I think that would be the greatest opportunity for someone with autism to have the most growth and personal growth, is to be trained by their peers and coworkers. So anything we can do to get people certified to work with people with autism, or just maybe don't even have to be certified, but maybe just a willingness to learn about autism and learn about the person and work with them on keeping the job and things like that, would be very helpful. So that's a great idea, actually.
So then the employers can start looking at it a little bit differently, where instead of having to get someone from the outside, a job coach or something, they could just have somebody with the willingness, like you said, to learn, who's already employed, who can then provide some support for somebody who's coming in, which really needs to happen, like you said, Travis, for anybody, right? Like when we all start a new job, we need support and we need training. And maybe the training just might look a little bit different, because there might be a social support aspect where you're catching on to the job aspects, really easily, but it's the social piece that you might just need a little bit more.
Absolutely.
support.
Absolutely. And maybe it's just as simple as like the HR team, hiring someone on the HR team that does that, that's able to come in and work and train and do some training and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think that'd be a really great idea. So,
and that makes for a much more inclusive environment for everybody, I think.
Absolutely.
Because we all struggle with something in the workplace. So, having those extra supports can only help.
Yes, I agree. Totally. The more support, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think, Travis? What do you think the young people right now with autism, kids in middle school, high school, what should be going on right now, you think, to better prepare these kids for the workplace one day?
Well, I'm a big fan of having a social skills curriculum in schools. So you do take like a life skills class, I guess, but it's very limited. And everybody takes it, but just a social curriculum to where you're learning the hidden curriculum, as opposed to like maybe, just have that as like a period in middle school and high school, like a class period, like you would have health class, or maybe like make it a special like gym or art or something like that, where you're taking that class and you're learning the hidden curriculum. But just, more like real life examples, maybe bring employers to the high school and let them do mock jobs. I know, for example, a lot of times they do like mock prom type stuff, like where they do like the car accident and things like that. But like you could do like mock employment opportunities to where you let people just try a job, and things like that. And I think that'd be really helpful for kids with autism as they grow. We know that it starts early, so if you want someone with autism to do something well at age 25, we want to start training them to do something that well at age 16 or age 14, so the earlier we start, the better, I think.
So right when that transition services starts at school, right, that would be a great time to really start building in some of those social supports. And the thing is that social skill deficits are not only for individuals with autism. I mean, they're also associated with other disability categories, and then even just other people struggle with anxiety or things that will impact their ability to socialize with other people. So I mean, that social skills curriculum is not so myopic that it's only going to benefit one group of people.
Right. And I would even argue that, for me at least, that the autism itself isn't the social challenge. It's the anxiety associated with the autism that creates the social challenges for me. Mm-hmm. So anyone who has anxiety is going to struggle socially, and the whole population of the school would benefit from some kind of social skills curriculum.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I think that, we work with a whole bunch of different people in the workplace. So the more understanding you have of other people, and how to interact and get along, the better. It can only do good.
Absolutely.
There's no downside.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're solving the world's problems here, guys.
Yes.
I mean,
if only they would listen
happening.
to us.
I know. That's the next step.
What challenges do you see yourself right now having in the workplace, Travis?
The biggest challenge that I have is that I really desire to have social relationships, and it's hard for me, my anxiety. It's hard for me to let that go long enough to go to work and focus on working. So the biggest challenge I would say at work is anxiety, and going through some of that. If you don't know how to interact, like, it's really, really amazing to me how, like, yes, you have to learn the social skills, but then you also have to learn how to break the rules. So neurotypicals learn the rules, but then everybody knows how to break the rules. So like everyone always tells you, don't date your coworkers, right? But I know a lot of folks who are married to someone that they were working with, or are dating someone that they were working with. So neurotypicals are very good at breaking their own rules. And so, like, not for someone with autism, you have to learn like how to follow the rules, but then you have to learn the context of when it's okay to break the rules and things like that. So we will use the word a lot, context. Context is king. So like certain situations, you might be able to do something one way, but in other situations, you might have to do something a different way. And it's hard for someone with autism to generalize and apply how and when to be able to do things a certain way and things like that. So that's the biggest challenge at work.
And it's hard, I guess, too, because if you are neurotypical, you're able to more easily generalize, like you said, right? Instead of having to learn each specific situation when this would be appropriate and when it wouldn't.
Right. Well, you're also better at reading the cues too, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, a lot of guys on the spectrum get in trouble at work for stalking. They're not reading the cue that she's not interested, or to where a neurotypical guy is going to pick up on that and be like, okay, she's not interested, on to somebody else, that type of thing. And plus, we also run into that. If we do pick up the cue, we might be fixating on her because we're like special interest, like type fixation. So it's just that much harder to let go. And unfortunately, too, a lot of times when people know we have a disability label, right? So they're nice to us. And sometimes we will confuse the niceness as she likes me. And that just leads to a whole cycle of repetitive behaviors.
Right.
And so it's those types of situations that are going to get you in trouble at work versus not necessarily knowing how to like tie a trash bag, for example, or make change or things like that. So
right. That's such a good point. So it's not necessarily the things that are associated with doing the job well. It's the social aspects that kind of surround, because those are infused in everything we do, right? The social.
Right.
So
I like to think of it as it's not necessarily the adaptive living skill. It's the social thinking skills that go with it. So like Michelle Garcia Winter, social thinking, very big, very important. And I'd like to see that expanded more for adults and working more on that type of issue. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see this. Granted, I've got young boys with autism, but both of them have these special interests, and I can just see it. My 10-year-old just being drawn to someone who would share that special interest with him, and latching on, because the person is nice and they share the special interest. And whenever you have been in a social skills training, do they hit on or touch on the stalking, the unintended stalking? Because I do get a lot of that from families that I'm trying to assist at work, that at school, or if they're young adults, they're in a job or they were at a job, and that's like a common issue with men, stalking issue.
Absolutely. So yeah, we get into like there's several components to this, but we're getting into like sexual behavior. So sexual behavior is social behavior, so we got to be comfortable with it. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are comfortable with it. But you have to work on boundaries. You have to work on like building the steps. Step 1 to step 787. How are you? Can we go on a date? And unfortunately, it's hard to get people to work on that level for several reasons. Biggest reason is third-party insurance. They don't like to pay for things like that. Like for example, learning how to flirt. Like if you try to write a goal that says I'm going to teach Travis how to flirt, you're going to get denied like right away. So like as a BCBA, it's very important to like learn how to write billable goals, but word them in a way that we can still work on the skill and the operational definition of the skill that we're trying to work on. And so, like for example, a lot of people try to work with me on lower level social skills. Like you can tell from talking to me that I know how to order my food at a restaurant. And like I'll have staff that tries to like their first thing that they meet me and they're like, well, let's take you to McDonald's and help you order your meal at McDonald's at the counter. So we're working on the wrong social skills, right? And what I'm trying to raise awareness to, and what I've always tried to raise awareness to is, like I'm on government funded services, so I'm using taxpayer money, and we don't want to be using taxpayer money to pay to teach me how to order my food at McDonald's. We want to use taxpayer money to teach me like skills that are social value, have social value to them for me. And so that's very important. And unfortunately, the system is working on improving. We're making some progress. And we're self-advocating, we're trying to teach them, but the system sometimes spends the money out of context and into the wrong areas versus where they could be spending money to eventually, because the goal is we want everybody to eventually be self-sufficient, be independent and go off of government funded services, right? But that's not going to happen if we're working on the wrong skills. So if we can get them to work on the right skills, we have a better chance of being independent and not needing supports any longer. So that's very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I never even thought about that. I'm sure you immediately thought about that, Stacy, because Stacy, guys, is a BCBAD. So just thinking about goals that are billable, you know, what Travis just said about, you know, probably not going to get approved. You know, I'm going to teach Travis how to flirt, you know, that is, I just never even thought about that, but that makes sense. And that's got to be a huge hurdle for providers to try and teach these skills to their clients, you know. Wow, that's so enlightening. Anything else you want to add, Travis? Anything that we haven't covered yet?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything. I like to say that I'm also a very black and white thinker, so I generalize things in like one or two areas, which makes relationships very hard, just due to the fact that you're either thinking of someone as an acquaintance or a best friend, and I don't have that circle of friends, that social network. So like I just overgeneralize a lot of things, and it's hard to, I don't think about the gray concepts in life, which is where a lot of beauty is, so in life. So
Well, every time that Travis and I get to have a conversation or I hear him, he's presented in a couple of my classes, I always learn something new. And I absolutely love that. So I hope, Travis, that one day again soon you'll come back on Community Conversations to talk some more with us, because I know, like I said, the things that you have to say and contribute are amazing. And I know that people who are listening and watching are learning something new too. So thank you.
yeah, I definitely enjoy talking. So it's always good to join you guys and have a conversation with you.
Thanks,
Definitely.
Travis.
All right. Well, we will hope that you will come back and join us again, because this has been awesome. So thank you so much. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Excuse me. And we will see you guys next month for Community Conversations. See you later.
Bye.
Everyone.